Welcome everyone to our webinar. We are going to get started here in just a minute. While folks are joining the chat, please drop us a line. Let us know where you're joining us from. We're excited to interact with you today and would love to hear from you. So let us know where you're joining us from. And we will give,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And another point of interest, after your location, put how many degrees Fahrenheit it is right now. And for some of us, you don't have to spend a whole lot of time typing in. Others, a little bit more. And there we go, Bridgeport, Connecticut with a 28.
28.
And you're glad to see that today, aren't you, Kim? Oh, my goodness. There we go. Peru
Oh, that's where I want to
79.
be. That's where I want to
Renato,
be.
we are jealous. Thank you, though, for passing that on. That is awesome.
Yeah,
Visalia,
48
California.
degrees in California.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. And there's
Oh,
Emma
fantastic.
May from hometown of Ohio here. Hello, Emma. Good having you here. And I see we have a variety of, wow, of other locations here.
And a wide
And
range of temperatures. And a lot of them
yes.
warmer than I know where I am, and probably more so even where you are, Dan.
Yeah, yeah. North Ridgeville 3. Obed, man, it is good seeing you here and stay warm, my man. That is cold.
Awesome. Again, as you are joining, please let us know where you're joining from in the chat and let us know what the temperature is in Fahrenheit where you're joining from. The weather's been a big topic of conversation, at least pre-webinar. So we want to live vicariously through the rest of you, especially those of you where it's warmer than where we are right now. Um, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're excited to bring this topic to you today. We've got a lot of great ideas to share with you. We're going to be talking about hiring sales talent, how to identify and select top performers, and a couple of quick housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded, and so it will be sent out to everyone who has registered. And please, we want to use the chat throughout our session today. So please keep your comments and your questions coming as we continue today. I am excited to introduce my co-host, Dan Agney. He is our Director of Talent Management Consulting, also a facilitator with the Brooks Group. If you are a current client of the Brooks Group, you may have interacted with Dan on assessment debriefs, in the classroom, and coaching, and you know that you are about to be treated to a wealth of information on a topic that I know he's passionate about, that I'm passionate about, which is selecting, hiring, coaching sales talent. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Great being here. And Michelle, I am so glad you are in charge of our sales performance research center. And I know whenever I have a question, I know who to call. So I think this is great that we're able to get together and talk through this topic today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dan. And just for point of reference, since we did ask about temperatures and locations, I am joining from North Carolina, where it is about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Dan, you're joining from Ohio.
Beaver Creek, Ohio, and my thermometer tells me that it's 40 degrees.
All right. So again, we are living vicariously through all of you who are uh, warmer than we are. And if you're colder, turn up the heat, grab a blanket, and let's dig in and talk about our about hiring and selecting top performers. We're going to be covering some key topics for you today. We're going to talk about identifying the skills and attributes for ideal sales candidates, assessment techniques to ensure fit for the role, how to benchmark positions, interview questions, and then strategies for streamlining the hiring process and really accelerating that onboarding and productivity process. So let's get into it. We said we
Sounds good.
wanted to engage you all in the chat. Tell us in the chat, what do you look for in a top performer? So sales leadership top performers, maybe even non-sales roles, but what is important to you all in a top performer?
Michelle, I love that question, because when you get a group of leaders and executives and people that are really concerned about how do we make this selection, you begin to see where different people's focus might be.
Hmm.
And it's surprising how many of them really have a keen sense of what it is that they are focusing on, which is hard to do.
Right,
Sometimes, as individuals in an organization, everybody has their own little area that they focus on. It's like, well, what do we agree on?
right,
That's the tougher
exactly,
part.
exactly. And I'm looking at some of these traits coming through. Proven past performance, consistency, resiliency, self-starting,
Mm,
open to change, negotiating skills, a go-getter, ability to open doors, build trust, adaptability, personality. And I love these. And these are things I know, Dan, I hear a lot in working with organizations. Hungry is another one. I know you hear a lot of this as well. So I think for us, as we talk about this topic during our session today, is how do we quantify these things? How do we evaluate
yeah.
consistency or resiliency, especially some of these things like past performance or industry expertise and that kind of thing, maybe are a little bit more obvious on a resume and in an interview, but a lot of these things can be a little bit nebulous in terms of, or subjective maybe, in
There you go.
how we evaluate them. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
No, that's true. And over the years, I've held national sales manager positions, and as I help the sales managers hire salespeople, without a systematic approach, sometimes there is so much weight put on the interview that
Mm-hmm.
it's like, and we need to have interviews to be able to ask strategic questions, but
Right.
much of the time, that time kind of gets wasted if we're not careful. It can
Right.
be wasted.
Yeah.
And so the question is, how do we really make the most of that time? But what else do we look for? And I think that's
Exactly.
that's the big question.
Yeah, I agree. And I think identifying fit for your organization, because someone could have a record of results in a previous organization or past performance, maybe for with a competitor. How does that translate in your organization, which might have a different culture or different goals or and that kind of thing? So, being able to really, I think, as you said, put a process around that hire around hiring and selecting, and also bring some objectivity to the process as well, and kind of get behind just the interview alone.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Keep those comments coming. We want to hear from you again as you have questions. These are really great traits and characteristics, things, as I said, things that we hear a lot from our clients. So how do we really evaluate these in terms of top performance? So Dan, let's talk about defining a top performer. And we're talking here about three different types of kind of considerations. So as you are thinking about
Mm.
what does a top performer look like, let's break these down. So tell me about these considerations: organizational, behavioral, and measurable.
Wow, great segments here. Let's start with the organizational. Um, you know, uh, what is your organization designed to take in? Um, it's it, I love looking at organizations' onboarding process, and I think those that have a great onboarding process have a better idea about the fit of the candidate coming in as to how well is that going to dovetail with the onboarding process. And also, if you have somebody that's maybe, I'm going to say a higher risk candidate, what do you need to do to adjust your onboarding process to make determinations quicker?
Yeah.
Um, and what kind of support? Because if you take a look at and there's ways of you can take a look at what are the different risk flags for a candidate. The big question comes in is if we hire this person, do we have the support mechanism to be able to augment those potentially weak areas? And then finally, time to return on investment. Sometimes during the assessment reviews, we I talked to the hiring managers about that because it's like, um, what are your thoughts on? They said, well, we have an immediate position. We need to get somebody in there quick. You have to ask the question, what's the price you pay if it's not the right hire?
Hmm.
And then also, if this person comes in maybe with an existing book of business, has not signed a non-compete agreement, and all those other things,
Right.
we could recoup the cost of bringing this person on a pretty short period of time. It's like, okay, that maybe lowers your risk of hiring a little bit.
Hmm.
That has to be
Yeah.
taken into account.
Yeah.
Um, then on the behavioral side, focusing in, of course, on the individual, the behavioral side, looking at the readiness of them. If they walk in the door, what are they bringing in with them? And how willing are they to be adaptable? And then looking at how willing are they to be coached? And are some of the things that are maybe yellow flags, does that just mean we could train that in them? Which means a little bit longer time before proof to competence, but that might be a worthwhile investment. But all those things we have to take a look at on an individual basis. And then finally, the measurable part. Um, yeah, what uh, the outcomes? First, looking in history, what outcomes have they achieved? What ones do we need them to achieve in our organization? And this key accountabilities thing, I know many times as a hiring manager, we may get the job description. We need that. I mean, we always have the job description. Here's what it is. But we need to boil it down to like, what are the five key accountabilities? What are the things that they're really being held accountable for? And it's not just results, it's also behaviors too. So looking at all those need to be taken into account for defining what a top performer looks like.
Yeah. And I find this fascinating and just incredibly valuable as well. I know, and just in my own experience, thinking about filling a role, just as you said, based on the job description, and we need somebody who can do these things. But there's so much more that goes into it. And I, especially appreciate what does that organizational support look like?
Yeah.
Because that's really going to change the type of candidate that you bring in. How are they wired? And what skills and attributes do they bring in to the role? And we cannot undervalue the importance of those key accountabilities. And I've seen it time and time again. And I like to phrase it. You mentioned, what are those five things that are most important? And I kind of frame that when I'm working with clients as what are those five things that if somebody does them successfully or exhibits those behaviors well, that if they are successful in these five things, regardless of whatever else is on the job description, will spell success. And
Oh,
to get
great way of
agreement,
stating it.
you
Yeah.
know, in getting agreement on those things, I think really just helps to clarify what it is that you're looking for. What are those most important aspects of the role? So as you're evaluating candidates, who aligns best and has the best shot and the best makeup of kind of accomplishing those or hitting those key accountabilities.
Yeah, Michelle, when we have our sales leadership accelerator class, many times, and then we take the sales managers through the exercise of what are the key accountabilities for that
Mm-hmm.
position. And I think one of the big things is not only for candidate selection, but it really helps to boil down those things that are really important. We need the
Mm-hmm.
job description, absolutely, to be able
Right,
to
right.
put in all the details, but the key accountabilities really help to boil it down and
Yeah,
people and to gain clarity in the organization.
exactly, exactly. And prioritize because, as just to kind of hammer that point home, the job description is going to have a lot of things on it. And a salesperson's job, there's many aspects to it, whether it's, prospecting and account management, there's reporting and administrative things, again, depending on your role, servicing accounts. But what is it that is most important? And I think it really helps for selecting, it helps for coaching, it helps for alignment within the organization. So again, cannot undervalue that, cannot um, or they're overvalue it, I guess. Like, cannot emphasize that point enough. So let's talk about, if we've got these considerations as we're defining top performers, let's talk about how you can go about really codifying that, defining that clearly. And one way to do that is through the benchmarking process. So Dan, I know this is something that you facilitate for clients that want something that's more formalized. So talk to us a little bit about job benchmarking, and then we'll break it down a little bit more as well.
Okay. Okay. Now, of course, within the Brooks Group, we do have a measurement system where we measure competencies. We measure the driving forces of an individual, which, competencies, that's kind of the experience level that a person brings. We measure it in 25 different competency areas. And then the driving forces are really gets to the motivation. Why does a person do what they do? And it's based in 12 driving forces. And then we also look at the behavioral side. And we look at 12 different behavioral traits. And what a benchmark does, it says, okay, out of all the things you could measure, what things are most important to position? So what you're seeing on the left there, the job benchmark comparison report, this is the result of a process of us sitting down with a client and going through a series of discussions as well as a survey tool, which helps to boil down, like, out of the 25 competencies, what are the top 7? And so we get agreement on that. And then out of the 12 driving forces, which ones are most critical to performance? Because when you take a look at it, the driving forces are really important because you can't really change driving forces. Those are something that's built into a person. So it's like, well, we'll train it out of them. No, I don't think you will.
No.
They're built in. But what it does do, it gives you a real good clue and a roadmap of how to help coach to that person's motivation should they come on board. And then finally, the behaviors, you can coach to that and some training on that. But it's those are the out of the possible 12, you look at what are the top 4. And then you're able to look at, well, how close is this candidate? How close do they come to matching up to those top characteristics? And that's what those colored boxes are on the right. Tell you the degree of fit that a candidate has for that. And I think, whenever there's an area that's a yellow, which is a fair compatibility, or a red, which is a poor compatibility, those are areas that you really want to ask the candidate further questions on, because those are areas of risk. Yellow being, yeah, there's some risk there. May not be a deal killer, but we
Mhm.
need to find out more about that. And red means, ooh, that could really affect long-term superior performance. And so getting this information before, I'm not saying before you talk to the person, this is after screening, this may even be after the first interview, but having at least one more opportunity to ask some questions is the right place to be able to ask them questions based on how they compare against the benchmark. And the questions that you have on the right over there, now the system automatically generates the questions for those that are yellow flags or red flags. But in any event, whether you do this manually or you use a system, once you identify where the riskier areas are, that's where your questions ought to be centered around for the interview so you get the most out of your interview time.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, this is just a great guide, right? Of, as you said, Dan, what's most important out of the all of the attributes that we measure, kind of boiling it down. And this is a process that we can formalize, or Dan, as you said, you can walk through informally with your organization, and we will give you some things to think through. One thing to note here, this is really an objective kind of benchmark. We're not basing it off of your existing top performers. It is, if we let the job kind of speak, without really factoring in individuals, and their characteristics.
Yeah,
Uh,
Yeah, Michelle, that's an important point that you're bringing up there because when you do a benchmark, you're benchmarking for either what you have or what you want. So you need to make sure that when you're benchmark, if because there's a fair amount of sales positions that by design they're going to be changing over the next 2 years. So do
Right,
you want to
right.
hire towards that? And if you do, like what you said, you need to let that future position speak for itself and create a benchmark based on that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And we talked about, obviously you pointed out, Dan, the sample interview questions. We're also going to talk about some additional interview questions and how you can
Okay.
develop your own interview questions here in just a few minutes that really can dig a little bit deeper into some of these areas. And again, this is how we would codify or kind of formalize a benchmark. But let's just talk about, in general, things that you should be considering, whether you create a formal benchmark or whether you are in your organization looking to kind of come to a consensus or agreement on what you need from your sales role. So here are some things that we would recommend that you consider some steps that you would take. So, Dan, talk to me about identifying role requirements, fit, and expectations.
You know that. Okay, I'm going to talk about that from the standpoint of first, let's talk about the job description.
Right?
The company says that this is what we need. But then so many times the job description can only go so far. Like for example, the role of a territory sales manager. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's usually a tried and proven job description or whatever else. But the thing of it is what territory are you hiring for? Is it one in which the territory you have cities that are more provincial? In other words, you kind of got to be from there in order to really relate to the people there,
Mm-hmm.
or are they more globally minded? And a lot that is important when considering how that's going to affect your selection of the candidate. So identifying the role requirements, fit, and expectations, it's taking that job description and overlaying on top of that what the requirements of that specific territory is.
Exactly. And I would add to that as well. Who are the customers that this role will be calling on? At what
Oh,
level are
yes,
they?
absolutely. Yeah. Are they
Are you
C-suite or more
exactly?
at the operational level or what? Yeah,
Yeah,
great point.
exactly. What percentage of this role is going to be prospecting for new business? What percentage of this role is going to be expanding existing accounts or servicing or whatever? But getting really clear on those aspects, and again, especially those expectations. Okay, something that's near and dear to both of us, Dan, assessing candidate skills, driving forces, and their acumen, like getting that objective measurement of those attributes.
Yeah, having a way of doing that. Of course, working for the Brooks Group, they sign our checks. We have a system, but over the
Yeah.
years, there are a variety of systems out there. It was interesting. I attended a session probably. It doesn't make a difference how many years ago. I lose count after a while. But the vice president of one of the candidate selection firms was there, and he made the statement. He said, "If you don't have a method of assessing," and he wasn't there to promote any particular assessments. You don't have a system to do that. You have a better chance of selecting the right candidate by flipping a coin. And he was saying that because it becomes so subjective that if you look at the odds of hiring, it's flipping a coin.
Hmm.
So that stuck with me. That's my only source of data for that statistic, but it stands to reason. You have to have something that's more objective
Right.
than uh, just the questions.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's something to go on other than your gut feel of in the
Yeah,
interview process. The data, you want the data. This is the data behind it.
that is. In fact, for a gut feel, I, I'm seeing a number of people here. They've got a lot of experience, and that gut
Hmm.
feel is usually pretty spot on. Pretty spot on. But the thing of it
Hmm.
is, we need to validate that through something objective too, because sometimes a gut feel can be caused by bad pizza last night, and the thing of it is that we do need to have something to measure it against. And all we're
Right,
saying is that this you do it with both.
right, right. 100%, 100%. We talked about this a little bit, kind of hinted at it this in the previous slide, but comparing trainable versus hardwired abilities, right? Things like driving forces, that motivational factor that really can't be changed. You can coach to it, you can't change it, that hardwiring versus trainable attributes or skills.
Yeah, that's so important. In fact, one of the attributes that came up, the word hungry was in the
Hmm.
chat window quite a bit,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's can you train hunger? That's more of a driving force than it is a
right,
trainable trait. So,
right,
uh,
right.
th that's a good example of that.
Yeah, it's a great example. And we also talked about factoring in company onboarding and support. So, what resources and structure is in place when you bring on a new employee, because again, that's going to factor into what you're looking for in terms of those skills and attributes as well.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes we fall into the habit of must have industry experience as a band-aid for the fact that we really don't have a good onboarding process or
Hmm.
support mechanism. And I'm not saying industry experience is bad by any sense. I mean,
Right, right.
however, if you have somebody that maybe doesn't have industry experience, but they have the experience that you need for the client base that you're going after, for the market conditions, now you've got a bigger and wider selection to choose from.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dan, we work with a lot of organizations with very technical sales roles.
Hmm.
And, sometimes I think we see organizations default towards hiring for that technical aspect and maybe less on the hardwired attributes that are needed for prospecting or asking for the business or asking good questions or cultivating accounts and that kind of thing. So, it's finding, to your point, it's finding that right balance of experience, kind of the hardwired capabilities, and understanding what kind of infrastructure you have in place to develop somebody and where you want to focus that effort.
Yeah, that's it. Sometimes you get somebody with 20 years of experience. Sometimes it's just 1 year, 20 times over.
Yeah,
And
that's a good point. That is a very good point. We have a question here, Dan. If someone has proven sales ability but can't seem to follow the rules or accept coaching to change some habits, what should you do or how long should you keep trying?
oh, wow, there's a great question. Michelle, answer that, please.
Oh, goodness. I mean, I think, Dan, I would love your thoughts on this. That's going to be more of a mindset kind of thing. And, it may be something that you have to look at that skill versus will.
You know what? That's exactly the case. And I got to tell you, one of the tools that will help you is a good, solid, if I say performance improvement plan, I can't tell how many organizations I've been in. As soon as you say performance improvement plan, oh, a PIP. Yeah, well, we put those on pink pieces of paper when we give them out, kind of a thing. I mean, truly, um, having one-on-one monthly or periodic meetings with an individual, but having a documented way of improvement. And improvement isn't just results, it's also behaviors. So listing those behaviors in the performance improvement plan, like following the rules or adhering to a particular process or either dropping a bad habit or adopting a new one, whatever that is, naming those and holding them accountable on a periodic basis, that begins to help you as the manager to um, see that if there's not progress in that area, and you know what, their sales may be even going up, but they're not really going to come off the plan until the behaviors improve too. And that gives you what you need as a sales manager to make the decision. How long do you do that? Well, probably, 2 to 3 months of sustained decrease is a pretty good reason for escalating to a higher up to and including other actions, as you might say. Um, but it's kind of general, but it's an approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you mentioned the accountability piece, which I think is so important. You're if you're putting somebody on that coaching plan and the expectations for change are clear and the accountability is there with the check-ins, then I think you have to stick to, you're either going to see improvement and or, forward progress or you're not.
Right. But
Um,
you got to have that regular accountability because if not,
right.
it's kind of like what Diane's looking at. It's like, when do you tell it? Well, you're now establishing a timeline. If you're not doing that, it can just float for a longer period
Yeah.
of time.
Yeah. Dan, another question. How can we differentiate between candidates who truly own a transferable book of business versus those who have simply worked accounts assigned to them?
Wow. I like that question because I would, this is where, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later,
Hmm.
but it's about the behavioral based questions.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, that one,
Yes.
and that's what,
Yeah.
because I'm not going to go there yet, but to answer this question, um, I would ask specific questions about, okay, so let's talk about this specific account. First of all, I would ask about opportunistic questions. Like, tell me how, take one of the opportunities in this account and tell me how you uncovered um, that it was a viable lead and take it all the way through to when it closed. Tell me what you did. And you want them to play it back. It's like they got a little recorder inside of them and you're pressing the play button and you want to hear how they did it. And then you want to hear about the results that they had from that. You want to hear about the relationships. Tell me about a time when you faced resistance in the account in that really could have set you back in your strategic plan. What did you do about it? And have them tell you about how they pursued it. Because you're absolutely right. Just a transferable book of business, you're going to be able to judge that by how much are they really integrated into the account and how much trust has been built.
Great.
I hope
Thank
that
you for
answers
that.
it.
Yeah, and we can even come back to this as when we talk about interview questions. You kind of gave us a sneak peek, but
Yeah, no, I couldn't help it.
I know, I know, I know, I know. But um, asking again, I'm a big fan of asking those behavioral based interview questions for examples and not just how would you do this? Like you want specific examples in those instances. So as we've talked about benchmarking and we've talked about assessing candidates. Assessments here will help us understand, how folks are wired, how they will sell, why they will perform, their overall mindset, and areas of kind of how they see the world around them, their skills, their competencies, and their selling skills. So this is an example, Dan, if you want to give us just a brief overview of this assessment and how it plays into the benchmarking process.
Are you asking me to be brief? Wow, there's a challenge for those who know me. But I will. Looking at the different things. First of all, the behaviors. Many of us are familiar with DISC, and really what that says is, how well this person sell. What's their style of selling? Are they more of a relator? Are they more of a friendly farmer? Are they more of a friendly hunter? Are they more of the friendly analyst? I mean, there's a variety of them. And depending upon what it is you're asking them to sell and in what territory, it's going to make a difference. So that's how they come across. Now, going deeper than that, the next one is driving forces. This is really important. Why are they selling? And there are some key indicators here. Like there's one driving force that we look at. It's the resourceful driving force. And that measures a person's drive for return on investment. In other words, they respond so well to a heavily leveraged comp plan. And you want that kind of measures hunger a bit,
Mhm.
and so that's strong. It measures other things too. One of the things I couldn't help but to look in the chat window, and the question came across bringing on new people who are natural change makers. You can begin to look at some of the driving forces and see, are these kind of natural change makers? Um, and the big question is how much do you want to make a change? It's some people you bring in and they are turnaround artists, but you don't have them in place to keep things going smoothly. Then the next is the acumen. And the acumen really measures a person's mental clarity and focus in six key areas. So it really helps to understand what are they most focused on. Just by looking at the sample graph here on the far left side, there's a real high rating over there that measures the person's focus and clarity on people. So that begins to tell us some things about where are they most focused on. Um, and then the next one is competencies, and that's more about what's the what's the level of their skills that they're really bringing into the role. But then specifically for salespeople, the last one, okay, what is their knowledge of the consultative selling process? And what's amazing here, Michelle, is that now this last one is based more on their knowledge of it. The other four are more psychological based. This last one is more knowledge based, but it's amazing how many times that um, even engineers that take this, but they have been in a consultative role, a lot of those skills transfer over into consultative selling. And it's measurable here. It says, ooh, there's a fair amount of transferability from their past experience into consultative selling.
Exactly, exactly. Just kind of to piggyback on what you're saying, Dan, and kind of going back to some of the comments and questions on the chat, like with Diane, um, coachability, the acumen assessment there kind of gives us a sense of someone's coachability. And to your point, Dan, as well on change makers, driving forces, and even in combination with some of those behaviors as
Mm,
well, someone that's going to be um, maybe more likely to change or prefer more variability even in activity. So different aspects here across these sciences. If you're going to use an assessment as part of your hiring process, we would advocate no more than a fourth of your decision is based on this. Obviously, you want the interview, you want the reference check, you want to understand their background, how well do they fit to culture. And we'd encourage a multi-science approach, something like what we're showing here. You don't want to rely on one science alone. You want more of a holistic view of the person as well. So some best practices if you are considering incorporating an assessment into your hiring process, whether you're using the Brooks Talent Index or something else, just kind of keep those factors in mind.
yeah, absolutely. That blend is what really gives you a fuller picture.
Yeah,
There, there,
absolutely.
sometimes our clients ask me the question and they know not to ask it, but they say, "Would you hire this person?" I say, I'm not gonna answer. I'm gonna give you a risk rating
Right.
for long-term superior performance, but there are other factors this doesn't take into account, like what you said, their experience level, the cultural fit, and all those things. That's for them to assess.
Exactly. And
To
I think that, yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. You
go ahead.
you brought up a really good point, this is measuring risk, right? This or level of risk, where the risks are. It is giving you the information to walk into a hiring situation eyes wide open to make a more informed decision on the candidates that you have to choose from. And in using an assessment like the Brooks Talent Index, any assessment that you are investing in, consider how you can use it across the life cycle of the employee. So this can be used for selection as an onboarding tool for training and team development, identifying those gaps and strengths, and where do you focus your training investments for coaching, for performance reviews, career development, They are applicable for sales and non-sales roles as well. Dan, anything you would add to this as in working with our clients and how they use assessments in general with their employees?
Some of our clients, of course, they use it for selection, and when they end up hiring one of those candidates, they'll use that for onboarding and walk them through the assessment. You should never show a candidate the results of the assessment because that's your property and it's for you to make decisions. But once they become an employee, now sharing that with them and helping to guide during onboarding is huge. And like you say, through the development, keep on using it. Now there may be elements of that that are more sensitive to change, like dimensional balance or selling skills, knowledge, and things like that. You may want to retake after a period of time
Mhm.
to get a new measurement. But this kind of information just really helps to understand the person, not only as they are, but where's the best place for them to work towards.
Yeah, and at the top of our session, we talked about ways to um, kind of make your productivity, your time to productivity, your onboarding process more efficient, and incorporating the tool throughout the process can do that. So sharing, as you said, sharing the assessment with your new hire, getting the manager involved, it improves communication. It helps the your new employee really understand where they're stronger, where do they need to focus their development, how are they most likely to sell, and to me that is the best first step, even beyond and before any additional on the job training or onboarding and that sort of thing. It just kind of sets that the onboarding process on the right path.
It does.
So as we are identifying ideal sales candidates, I think a lot of these terms kind of came up in our chat at the
Oh,
beginning of
look
the
at that.
session.
Yeah.
Yeah. But these are things that we find that clients are looking for, that ask us about. So some common kind of characteristics that organizations are looking for. What are your thoughts on this, Dan?
Looking over the list here, yeah, of course, it depends on the market, but I think one of the things that in fact came through a strong one is coachability.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because even if somebody comes in, it's like, oh, well, they worked on their industry and then, whatever else, things are going to change over the next few years. So they need to be coachable. And many of the clients are building more of a coaching environment. We're
Mm-hmm.
learning organizationally the value of that, the value of doing the measuring of behaviors and helping people along that way. So a person really needs to be inclined to be more coachable to really have a
Mm-hmm.
fit in a coaching environment.
I agree. I agree. You can have all the other traits, but also the ability to take that feedback and continue to grow and want to continue to grow and have that mindset. And I think that makes a huge difference in someone's performance, across the board. On the other hand, you may have to develop someone or focus on some of the
Hmm.
skills that the trainable skills, and you want that coachability as well. So paying attention to and watching for that coachability is critically important in the selection process.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we're digging deeper into some of these characteristics, let's talk about interview questions. We've been teasing that as we've
Hmm.
gone along, but let's talk about kind of best practices for interviewing and asking those behavioral based questions. So Dan, walk us through some of these best practices here.
Okay. Well, we finally get the behavioral based questions. This is good. All right. So I really like that because what you're doing is asking a person to relate something that they've actually done. Past behavior is a pretty good indicator of what they're going to do in the future. If we ask a person, what would you do? We're asking them to fantasize. Now, it's not necessarily a bad question to say, how would you handle a situation or things like that? That's fine. But we have to have behavioral based questions to find out, well, how have you handled these things in the past? And to zero in on what we're really looking for. An example to that would be um, sometimes we get an indicator from their behavioral assessment that they're more of a methodical paced individual. And what that means is that if they're put into a high-paced environment, they may really get frustrated and could potentially shut down at times. So asking a behavioral-based question, and for those that have gone through my assessment debriefs, know this is a personal favorite of mine. Like to ask the question. So tell me about it. Tell me about over the past 6 months, your most hectic day. How many activities did you take care of, and how did you do it? How did you get through it? And the importance of that question is that you're asking them, first of all, they're defining what hectic is. And if they say, yeah, gosh, we had like I had like four different customers in one day, and you're going, man, that just happens in 1 hour here. You're beginning to
Right.
level set and understand what that is. Um, and it kind of gets into that box below it, decide uh, what to listen for, their baseline versus yours, getting them to define what is hectic, what is too much, what is for a salesperson. You get somebody who's hungry. It's great. Is he so hungry that all he's doing is just grabbing low-hanging fruit? So I would ask him a behavioral-based question about, tell me about the longest sales cycle that you had. Walk me through it. And if he says, well, it was 3 weeks, man. If you got a year and a half sales cycle, you're up for a challenge here that maybe is not compatible. So it's so important to use these behavior questions to achieve that second box down there, to listen for how close is their baseline to your baseline. Um, Using the assessments to identify areas to dig deeper into, um, that is such that is so valuable because you have a limited period of time with the candidates. So you might as well spend the time in the risky areas so you can hear for yourself, how much of a risk is this for us? Because really, the assessment shows you where the risk area is, but it's still your job as hiring manager to figure out how much of a risk is that really? If they don't come with that much experience, we have a mechanism that can help them with that. We have a workaround on that. In which case, okay, so that risk is somewhat mitigated because of that. But you got to dig deeper. And what really works well is if your company does team interviews. Now, when I say team interviews, some companies, four people will be in one room asking the one person, and other will be four separate interviews, and then the team will compare notes at the end. I don't care which thing is, but if you have the questions in advance and you divvy them up among team members, you achieve much more and a better use of your time that way.
Yeah.
So I think I covered most of that. What did
Yeah.
I miss, Michelle?
No, I think you did great. You were very comprehensive. I again, and I go back to on the risk on the development areas, just to kind of add to what you said. Again, what can you change, right? What can you train versus coach, and that hardwired versus trainable, and then again, to what extent is that important in that role? So again, if it's a prospect, if it's a role that is all outbound prospecting, and the assessment is indicating someone that is maybe more inclined to um, develop existing accounts, then really dig into those behavioral questions, and
Yes.
and go deeper and ask follow-up questions. We in sales training we teach three deep. Ask those follow-up questions, and if you're not getting a comprehensive answer the first time, tell me more about that. And then how did you handle that? Kind of go deeper until you get that answer that fully satisfies either the it clears the flag for you or kind of helps mitigate that flag or gives you the sense that, yeah, we're not going to change that.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you said that. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, feel free to drop us some questions. We want to hear from you, curious about some of the interview questions even that you all are using. And we're going to get to some samples here, some more behavioral interview questions. Dan, the first one
Yep.
you
I gave
covered,
it
and
away.
you gave that one away. That's okay. Um, and we with Margarita's question on differentiating between candidates who um, are bringing a book of business between and working the existing accounts that were given to them. And you mentioned that question about, walk me through an opportunity that you generated the lead all the way to closing. So another example of those behavioral questions. But some examples here. We also have an article on our blog with some additional interview questions. Anything else that you would add here, Dan, in terms of these interview questions? Any additional tips?
This kind of addresses the one comment about bringing in change agents into your
Mm-hmm.
organization. Question number 3, I really
Yep.
like asking this question. Tell me about a time when you disagreed with a company policy or procedure. How did you get around it? Now, the wording of this is very powerful because the second part, how did you get around it? There's an inference of saying, tell me what you really did. Now, for some people, that means, hey, I worked within the system. We got an exception to the rules, and what you go, okay, that's very compatible here. Or they may say, well, let me tell you what I did. Um, I think the catch thing here is, creativity can get you the sale, or creativity can get you in jail. You need to make sure
Right.
that you understand what the mode of operation is here.
Right. And that's a great one too, for, as you said, change makers, but also, and just to kind of follow up, if you're in a high compliance environment, that you have to follow certain procedures, Dan, it can land you in jail. A great way to suss that out. We have a comment from Nick. Some of his interview questions. What's your favorite program or product to sell? Why do your customers want this product so much? When do you know when a potential customer would be perfect for this product? So kind of sussing out even some selling skills and qualifying opportunities.
I like that, Nick.
Yep. Yep. And Donna Marie, tell me how you developed a book of business.
There you go.
Mhm.
That's the perfect question.
Yeah. So
We
thank you
might,
for those.
yeah, we might add
We
those to
might
the
steal
list
some of
here, you know?
those. Yes, yes. We might incorporate some of those
There's a
into
collaborative
our
effort
list.
going
Yeah,
on right here.
right, right. Resiliency. Tell me about a sale you've lost and how you bounced back from that. Because that one
Yeah,
was on our earlier list. So again, kind of thinking through what are those characteristics you're trying to dig deeper in, and then how do you quantify that or kind of um, bring that out and have a candidate demonstrate that for you.
yeah.
So in terms of the selection process, let's walk through a sample. This is actually a selection process that one of our clients uses. And they're a client, they've actually, um, in following this process, using assessments in their onboarding process, they have reduced their onboarding time from 1 year to 90 days in getting
Wow.
new sellers up, to productivity. Um, so just an example here of how some of the tools that we've talked about and some of the best practices that we've talked about kind of fit into that selection process. They start with the resume and an online application, a one-on-one interview with the candidate, so an initial interview. They give the candidate an assessment. They go through an assessment debrief with the hiring manager, someone like Dan, who kind of walks through the results, points out the flags, gives it a risk rating. They have an executive review with their VP of sales. So their VP of sales in this particular case is is kind of overseeing and evaluating candidates as well. Then they do the reference check. Then they do an offer. So if you'll notice, the offer isn't anywhere on in this process. It is after this process is completed.
I think one of the things that they also it's not stated in this, and it's off the map, but they reserve the right to bring the candidate in for a second interview based upon
Right.
the assessment debrief risk. And you always want to have that as a in your back pocket.
Yeah. Yeah. Dan, a couple of questions here on just back on interview questions. If you're asking behavioral questions, how do you ask them without continually asking, tell me about a time when? Tell me about a time when. So, do you have any other ways of rephrasing kind of that segue into the question?
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, sometimes it's just uh, so. What about some of the accounts that you had? That just pick one. How did you get from here to here? So it's a way of wording it like that. And I'm going to tell you one of the things, write them all out as tell me a time when. Just write them all out like that, and then put it in Chat GPT and say reword it so it doesn't sound like that. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
It'll come up with some pretty good suggestions for you.
There you go, a shortcut. Walk me
Yeah, that's,
through
I'm
it.
sorry. That was just, I'm
Yeah.
just relying on AI there for that. So
Hey, work smarter, right? Work smarter.
that's it.
Do you use role plays in the selection process?
You know what? I got to tell you, some of our clients, they do role plays, but they even have them do a presentation. So it's a role play, but it involves actually doing a presentation to the executive staff.
Yeah,
So we've seen clients have a variety of configurations with that.
yeah, yeah. Um, we've got one more question in here as well. Reference checks can be tricky when the applicant is currently employed, especially if they're employed in the same industry. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, everybody has a different way of doing reference checks, and you don't want to put the candidate at risk. Um, so sometimes references are more um, who they know. And some you look on LinkedIn and see who they have connections with. Sometimes if you know the connection and you know that there's a confidence or they can confide in them, but it is tricky, and it's something that uh, I think you have to feel comfortable that you're not messing it up for the candidate.
Yeah, yeah. You may have to get a little bit creative there, and just talk to the candidate as well. I mean, sometimes they have people already lined up, or some people may be aware that they're looking for a job, or and that kind
That's
of thing.
true.
Yeah. As we're continuing to take questions, I just want to review really quickly, kind of just a quick summary of some things that we've talked about: understanding goals, defining good fit. You want to benchmark role specific profiles, use assessments as a guide, identify strengths and areas of improvement, trust the data, not the gut feel, and continuing to coach and develop. We have some resources as well. If you are interested in learning more, feel free to scan one of these QR codes or both of these QR codes for more information. Um, Question, Dan, how much online presence should we look for when choosing a candidate, like their
Oh, we
LinkedIn
only
posts,
have a minute.
connections?
Yeah, I see that. I see that. I think it's a great question. I'm gonna be as concise as I
Go.
can.
Yep.
And that is what their online activity, particularly in LinkedIn, is going to tell you a lot. Are they using it to really present what they can do for their clients, or is it just a place to put their resume? If you see them really using it and they're posting often and they've got references in there and they're giving recommendations and getting recommendations, you know somebody that's pretty well connected in the right way in social media.
Yeah. Yeah. And Amber said, commented, I shoot for people in LinkedIn that are active, and have connections.
There you go.
Yeah,
Well, Amber, you took what I said in 2 minutes and boiled it down to one sentence. So yeah, I love it.
yeah, yeah. But I think your point is well taken, Dan. How are they using LinkedIn? And in terms of overall effectiveness. Nicholas, I think the best salesperson is the one who's creating content built for his or her prospects.
That's it.
They know, who they know, well connected, and attends groups in live and web. So again, it's
Yes.
how they are using the tool more than just are they online.
Yeah, that's it.
We want to thank you very much for joining us today and for your engagement, for your questions. We would love for you to connect with us on LinkedIn. So feel free to scan the QR code there and shoot us a invitation on LinkedIn. Speaking of LinkedIn. And Dan, thank you so much for
It's
sharing
my
your expertise today.
pleasure. Thank you for having me here. And it's always a pleasure working with you, Michelle. It's a pleasure working with our clients that are out here too. I'm looking here and seeing quite a few. Uh,
Exactly.
so thank you.
Yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions for Dan, for me, for anyone at the Brooks Group. Feel free to reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. And again, thank you so much, Dan. And until next time, we hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you.